The horizon blazed crimson when Fiona Everett first rode into Painted Rock, the small town clinging to the edge of the Montana Territory, like a stubborn burr on a wild horse's mane. The year was 1873, and the West was still as untamed as the spirit that had carried her 2,000 miles from Boston, with nothing but a medical bag, a stubborn determination, and a promise to her dying father to use her skills where they were most needed. Dust swirled around her boots as she dismounted from her weary mare. 6 days of hard riding had left her clothes travel-worn and her face wine-burned, but her blue eyes remained clear and resolute. Her chestnut hair, escaping from its once neat bun, framed a face that carried both the softness of her 24 years and the determination of a woman who had fought to earn her place in a medical profession that barely tolerated her kind. "Water for your horse, miss?" A young stable boy approached, eyeing her with undisguised curiosity. "Thank you," Fiona replied, handing over the reins and a coin. "Could you point me toward Sheriff Blackburn's office? I've a letter for him." The boy's face darkened. "Ain't got no sheriff no more, miss. Not since the fever took him 3 weeks past." Fiona's heart sank. Her correspondence had been with Sheriff Blackburn, who had written of the town's desperate need for a doctor after theirs had been killed in a stagecoach robbery. "I see. Who's in charge of the town now?" "Reckon that'd be Mayor Wilson, though he don't do much. Folk mostly look to Flynn Archer when trouble comes." The boy pointed down the dusty main street. "Mayor's office is yonder, past the saloon." Fiona nodded her thanks and retrieved her medical bag from the saddle. Her legs protested after days in the saddle, but she straightened her spine and walked with purpose toward the heart of Painted Rock. The town was like dozens of others springing up across the frontier, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a saloon doing brisk business despite the early hour, and the unmistakable mix of hope and hardship written on the faces of its inhabitants. Women carrying baskets paused to stare at her unusual attire, a practical riding skirt and jacket rather than the elaborate bustle and corset fashionable back east. Men tipped their hats with varying degrees of curiosity. The mayor's office was a small room attached to the general store. Inside, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from a ledger. "Mayor Wilson?" Fiona inquired. The man blinked owlishly. "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you, miss?" Dr. Fiona Everett." She extended her hand in the businesslike manner she'd adopted to survive in medical school. "I'm here in response to Sheriff Blackburn's letters regarding the need for a physician." Mayor Wilson's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. "A lady doctor?" Sheriff Blackburn sent for a lady doctor. "He sent for a doctor," Fiona corrected firmly. "And I'm fully qualified. I graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania 2 years ago and have been practicing in Boston since." "But," the mayor's face flushed. "This is the frontier, Miss Everett. We have mining accidents, gunshot wounds, difficult births, and remote homesteads. All of which I am entirely capable of handling," Fiona replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I've treated miners with crushed limbs, bullet wounds, and I've delivered more babies than I can count. Now, where is the doctor's office located?" Mayor Wilson hesitated, then sighed in defeat. "Dr. Holloway's old place is at the end of town, small cabin with a sign out front. But it's been empty since he died. Nothing's been cleaned or organized." "I'll manage," Fiona said, turning to leave. "Miss Doctor," Mayor Wilson called after her, "you should know that not everyone will welcome you. This isn't Boston." Fiona's smile was small but determined. "No place ever welcomes change, Mayor, but eventually they adapt." She exited into the bright sunlight, feeling the weight of curious stares as she made her way toward the doctor's office. The small cabin at the edge of town was indeed in disarray. Dust covered every surface. Medical supplies were scattered, and the small adjacent room that served as living quarters was spartanly furnished with a bed, table, and stove. Fiona set her bag down and removed her hat, surveying what would be her new home and practice. It would take days to organize, clean, and inventory the supplies. But first, she needed to announce her presence to the town. She was in the process of cleaning the front window to create a sign when the door burst open. A young woman, barely more than 18, stood there wild-eyed and breathless. "Are you really a doctor?" she gasped. "I am," Fiona replied, straightening. "Dr. Everett, "It's my pa," the girl said desperately. "He's been kicked by a horse. He's bleeding something awful and can't move his leg." Without hesitation, Fiona grabbed her medical bag. "Take me to him." The girl led her to a small farm just outside town, where a man lay on a makeshift bed in the barn, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, blood seeping through a rough bandage. "I'm Dr. Everett," she said, kneeling beside him. "I'm going to help you." The man's eyes widened in surprise, but pain quickly overrode any objection he might have voiced. Fiona worked efficiently, cutting away his trouser leg to reveal a compound fracture. For the next hour, she cleaned, set, and bandaged the break, her hands steady and sure. "You'll need to stay off this leg for at least 6 weeks," she instructed when she'd finished. "I'll check on you tomorrow to ensure there's no infection." "Thank you, doctor," the man said, his earlier skepticism replaced by gratitude. Word of Fiona's successful treatment spread quickly through Painted Rock. By the time she returned to her cabin, 3 more patients were waiting a child with a high fever, a pregnant woman worried about spotting, and a minor with a festering hand wound. Fiona treated them all, postponing her own unpacking and organization. Night had fallen by the time she closed her door, exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. She had barely managed to clear enough space on the bed to sleep when a pounding at her door roused her. A young boy stood there, hat in hand. "Doc, there's trouble at the Silver Dollar. A man's been shot." The Silver Dollar Saloon was in chaos when Fiona arrived. Men crowded around a table where a body lay sprawled, blood pooling on the wooden floor. The crowd parted reluctantly as she pushed her way through. "Give me space," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority she had learned to project in hospital wards. The wounded man was young, perhaps 25, with a bullet wound in his shoulder. As Fiona began to examine him, the saloon doors swung open, and the atmosphere in the room instantly changed tension, ratcheting up like a drawn bowstring. "What the hell happened here?" a deep voice demanded. Fiona glanced up to see a tall man silhouetted in the doorway. Even in the dim light, his presence commanded the room. Broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, he wore a gun belt with the casual comfort of a man who knew how to use it. His face, partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, bore the weathered lines of someone who'd spent years under the harsh western sun. "Rawlins pulled on Flynn," someone volunteered. Flynn was faster. The wounded man, Rawlins, apparently groaned as Fiona probed the wound. "The bullet's still inside," she announced. "I need to get him to my office where I have proper tools and light." "And who might you be?" the newcomer asked, stepping fully into the light. His eyes, startlingly green against his sun-darkened face, regarded her with suspicion. "Dr. Fiona Everett," she replied without looking up from her patient. "I need help moving this man before he bleeds out completely." For a moment, the man Flynn, she presumed, seemed taken aback. Then he gestured to 2 burly men nearby. "Harper, Davis, help the doctor. Get Rawlins to the doc's office. The rest of you, clear out. Show's over." His authority was unquestioned. Within minutes, Fiona was back in her disorganized office, directing the placement of the wounded man on the examination table. Flynn Archer followed, leaning against the doorframe, watching with crossed arms as she worked by lamplight to extract the bullet and suture the wound. "You handled that well," he finally said, as she finished bandaging Rawlins' shoulder. For a woman?" Fiona supplied, washing blood from her hands in a basin. "I assure you, Mr. Archer, my gender has no bearing on my medical abilities." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was going to say, for a greenhorn. You're new to these parts." "Arrived today," she confirmed, drying her hands. "Sheriff Blackburn wrote about the town's need for a doctor. Blackburn's dead, so I've learned." Fiona looked directly at Flynn for the first time. In the lamplight, she could see his face clearly now, strong-jawed, with a small scar above his right eyebrow, and eyes that had seen more than their fair share of troubles. "Does that change the town's need for a physician?" Flynn held her gaze. "No, it doesn't. But Painted Rock isn't Boston or Philadelphia. It's a rough place that attracts rough men. The last doctor was killed for the laudanum in his cabinet." "I'm aware of the risks," Fiona replied. "And I'm not easily frightened away, Mr. Archer." "Flynn," he corrected. "Just Flynn." He pushed away from the doorframe. "Rawlins there pulled a gun on me because I caught him cheating at cards. Tomorrow, when he wakes..." He might decide to hold a grudge against the person who saved his life. I'll take that chance. Flynn shook his head. Suit yourself, Doctor, but don't say you weren't warned. He turned to leave, then paused. I ride for the Triple R Ranch, north of town. If you need anything, send word. With that cryptic offer, he departed, leaving Fiona to wonder exactly who Flynn Archer was, a gunslinger, a rancher, or something else entirely. The next days passed in a blur of activity. Fiona treated patients from sunup to sundown, cleaned and organized her office, and gradually earned the tentative respect of Painted Rock's residents. She learned the rhythms of the small frontier town, how the miners came in on Saturdays, with their week's wages to drink and gamble, how the ranch hands rode through on cattle drives, how the women gathered at the general store to exchange news and assess newcomers. She also learned more about Flynn Archer. He was the foreman of the Triple R, the largest ranch in the territory, owned by a wealthy Easterner who rarely visited his holdings. Flynn had fought for the Union in the war, then drifted west like so many restless men, eventually finding his place in the saddle and on the range. His reputation as a fair but hard man preceded him, and she noticed how people deferred to his judgment in matters concerning the area. Their paths crossed occasionally, when a ranch hand was thrown from a horse, when a dispute needed settling in town, when supplies arrived on the stagecoach. Each time, Flynn acknowledged her with a respectful nod, but maintained his distance. She sensed he was watching her, assessing whether she would truly stay or flee back east at the first real challenge. That challenge came sooner than expected, on a stormy night 3 weeks after her arrival. Fiona was awakened by frantic pounding at her door. A woman stood there, soaked to the skin, terror in her eyes. Please, she begged. My husband, he's been shot by rustlers. He's dying. Fiona grabbed her bag and followed the woman to a wagon where a man lay moaning, blood soaking through makeshift bandages on his chest and leg. My ranch is an hour's ride, the woman explained as Fiona examined the wounds. I couldn't treat him there. The chest wound was the most concerning. The bullet had punctured a lung. He needs surgery immediately, Fiona decided. Help me get him inside. For the next 2 hours, Fiona fought to save the rancher's life. Working by lamplight as thunder crashed outside, she extracted the bullets, repaired what damage she could, and finally stepped back, her apron covered in blood, exhaustion etched on her face. He'll live, she told the anxious wife, but he's not to be moved for at least a week. Thank you, the woman whispered, tears streaming down her face. When the rustlers attacked, I thought... She broke off, overcome. You said rustlers did this? Fiona asked, washing her hands. The woman nodded. They hit 3 ranches this week, took nearly 50 head from the Triple R 2 nights ago. Fiona's heart skipped. Does Mr. Archer know you're here? No, the woman replied. Our place is small, just south of his range. But he'll be in town tomorrow. There's a meeting at the saloon to organize a posse. The meeting was indeed taking place when Fiona stepped into the Silver Dollar the following afternoon. She'd come to speak with the mayor about acquiring more medical supplies, but the crowded saloon and Flynn's commanding presence at the center drew her attention. These aren't ordinary rustlers, Flynn was saying to the assembled men. They're organized, well-armed, and they don't hesitate to shoot. Jenkins nearly died last night. Doc Everett saved him, someone volunteered, and heads turned to notice Fiona standing near the door. Flynn's eyes met hers, something unreadable passing through them. Doctor, he acknowledged. How is Jenkins? Stable, she replied. The bullet missed his heart by less than an inch. He was fortunate. Fortunate would have been not getting shot at all, Flynn responded grimly. We're forming a posse to track these rustlers. They've hit 5 ranches now, and 2 men are dead. It has to stop. The meeting continued, with plans made for a group to ride out at dawn. Fiona listened, sensing the undercurrent of fear and anger in the room. When the men dispersed, Flynn approached her. You did good work with Jenkins, he said quietly. I did what needed to be done, Fiona replied. A hint of a smile touched Flynn's lips. That seems to be your answer for everything, Doctor. It's the truth, she said simply. Will you lead the posse tomorrow? He nodded. Someone has to. These rustlers are unlike any I've seen. They seem to know exactly when and where to strike. Be careful, Fiona found herself saying. I'd prefer not to have to dig bullets out of you as well. Flynn studied her face for a long moment. "I'll keep that in mind, Doctor." The posse rode out the next morning, 10 men, including Flynn. Fiona watched from the doorway of her office, an unexplained uneasiness settling in her chest as they disappeared into the dawn light. 3 days passed with no word. Fiona kept busy with her patients, but worry nagged at her. On the afternoon of the 4th day, a rider came pounding into town, his horse lathered and exhausted. "The posse's been ambushed," he shouted. 4 men dead, others wounded. They're holed up in an old line shack on Bitter Creek. Fiona's heart lurched. "Flynn Archer?" "Alive, last I saw," the rider gasped, "but shot bad, sent me to get help." Without hesitation, Fiona began gathering supplies. "I need a wagon and someone who knows where this line shack is," she announced to the gathering crowd. "You can't go out there, Doc," Mayor Wilson protested. "It's too dangerous. Those rustlers could still be around." "Those men need medical attention," Fiona replied firmly. "I'm going. Who's coming with me?" An hour later, Fiona was bouncing along a rough trail in a wagon driven by an elderly ranch hand who knew the territory. Her medical bags were packed with everything she might need, and a Winchester rifle, a gift from a grateful patient, lay within reach. The line shack was a crude, one-room structure nestled against a rocky hillside. As they approached, a warning shot kicked up dirt near the wagon. "It's Doc Everett," her companion shouted. "We're here to help." After a tense moment, a figure appeared in the doorway, waving them in. Inside, the small cabin was a scene of misery. 2 men lay dead in the corner, covered with blankets. 3 others, including Flynn, were wounded. Flynn lay on a makeshift pallet, his face ashen, a blood-soaked bandage around his thigh. His eyes widened when he saw Fiona. "You shouldn't have come," he rasped. Fiona knelt beside him, already opening her bag. "I always go where I'm needed, Mr. Archer. Now lie still while I examine that wound." The bullet had torn through Flynn's thigh, missing the artery but causing significant damage. Infection had already set in, his skin burning with fever. "This will hurt," she warned as she prepared to clean the wound. Flynn managed a pained smile. "I reckon I've had worse." Fiona worked methodically, cleaning, disinfecting, and eventually stitching the wound. Flynn remained stoically silent throughout, though sweat beaded on his brow from the pain. "The bullet's out, and I've cleaned it as best I can," she told him when she finished. "But you need proper care. We have to get you back to town." "The rustlers are still out there," Flynn argued weakly. "We tracked them to their camp, but they were waiting for us. Someone tipped them off." "That's a problem for another day," Fiona said firmly. "Right now, my concern is preventing you from losing that leg or your life." With the help of the others, she managed to get Flynn and the other wounded men loaded into the wagon. The trip back to town was slow and agonizing, every bump in the trail drawing grunts of pain from the injured men. Night had fallen by the time they reached Painted Rock. Fiona directed that Flynn be brought to her own quarters rather than the examining room, knowing he would need constant care. For 3 days she barely left his side, fighting the fever that raged through him, changing bandages, and forcing medicine between his cracked lips. On the 3rd night, as she bathed his forehead with cool water, his eyes suddenly opened, clear and lucid for the first time since his return. "You're still here?" he murmured. "Where else would I be?" Fiona asked softly. "Most folks would have run by now," Flynn said. "Back east to safety." Fiona smiled. "I'm not most folks." "No," he agreed, his voice gaining strength. "You certainly are not, Dr. Everett." "Fiona," she corrected, "I think saving your life puts us on a first-name basis." A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. "Fiona?" Then, his hand found hers, surprisingly strong despite his weakness. "Thank you." As Flynn recovered, a subtle shift occurred in their relationship. He spoke more freely with her, sharing stories of his past, his childhood in Kentucky, his experiences in the war, his journey west in search of something he couldn't quite name. Fiona, in turn, told him of her own path, her father's support of her unconventional ambitions, the challenges she'd faced in medical school, her determination to practice where she could make a real difference. "Why Painted Rock?" he asked one evening as she changed his bandage. "You could have gone anywhere." Fiona considered the question. Sheriff Blackburn's letter described a town on the edge of nowhere that had lost its doctor. People who needed help but had nowhere to turn. She shrugged. It seemed like the place I was meant to be. Flynn watched her work, her hands gentle but sure. Most women want security, a home, children. I'm not most women, Fiona replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Though wanting those things and wanting to be a doctor aren't mutually exclusive. Something shifted in Flynn's eyes, a realization dawning. Before he could respond, however, the door burst open and Mayor Wilson rushed in. "The rustlers hit the Donovan place," he gasped, "burned the house, killed Tom Donovan, and took his whole herd." Flynn struggled to sit up. "They're getting bolder. This has to end." "You're not going anywhere," Fiona said firmly, pushing him back down. "You can barely stand, let alone ride." "She's right, Flynn," the mayor agreed. "Besides, we think we know who's behind it now." Jenkins recognized one of the men who shot him, Jack Harmon. Flynn's face darkened. "Harmon used to ride for the Triple R. I fired him 6 months ago for stealing." "Well, he's put together quite a gang," Mayor Wilson said grimly. "The territorial marshal is sending men, but they won't be here for days." After the mayor left, Flynn lay in frustrated silence, his jaw clenched tight. "You know something," Fiona observed. "Something you're not saying." Flynn hesitated, then sighed. Harmon couldn't organize something this sophisticated on his own. He's not smart enough. Someone's backing him, someone who knows the ranches, the schedules, the territory. "You have a suspicion?" Flynn nodded slowly. "Harrison Wade owns the bank, has land holdings he's trying to expand. If ranchers start failing because of rustlers, they'd have to sell," Fiona finished, "and he'd be there to buy at a fraction of the value." "It's just a theory," Flynn cautioned, "but Wade arrived in town right before the rustling began, and he's been mighty quick to offer loans to struggling ranchers at interest rates that would eventually break them." Over the next few days, as Flynn continued to recover, Fiona observed Harrison Wade with new eyes. The banker was a smooth-talking man in his 40s, expensively dressed and unfailingly polite. He made a point of stopping by her office, ostensibly to welcome her to town, but clearly gauging her relationship with Flynn. "Mr. Archer is fortunate to have such dedicated care," Wade remarked with a thin smile, "though I wonder if your attachment to a particular patient might compromise your availability to others in need." "My professional judgment is never compromised, Mr. Wade," Fiona replied coolly, "and Mr. Archer's condition required close monitoring to prevent amputation." Wade's smile never wavered. "Of course, doctor. I meant no offense. I simply want to ensure that Painted Rock benefits fully from your considerable skills." After he left, Fiona couldn't shake the feeling that his visit had been a veiled warning. That evening, she shared her concerns with Flynn, who was now able to move around her small quarters with the aid of a crutch. "Wade's worried," Flynn concluded. "He knows I suspect him." "Which makes you a continued threat," Fiona pointed out, "as long as you're alive to accuse him." Flynn's expression hardened. "I need to get back to the Triple R. Round up my men." "You're not strong enough," Fiona protested. "I'm strong enough to sit a horse," Flynn countered, "and I'm no good to anyone hiding here." Their argument was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. When Fiona opened it, a young ranch hand stood there, hat in hand. "Miss Fiona, Mr. Flynn needs to know Wade's men are at the Triple R. They're saying they're taking possession on behalf of the bank. Something about a defaulted loan." Flynn cursed, reaching for his gun belt. "That's impossible. The Triple R has no loans with Wade's bank." "It's a trap," Fiona said urgently. "They're trying to draw you out." "Then it's working," Flynn replied grimly. "I can't let them take the ranch." Despite Fiona's protests, Flynn prepared to leave. As he strapped on his gun belt, his movements still stiff with pain, Fiona made a sudden decision. "I'm coming with you," she announced, reaching for her medical bag. Flynn shook his head. "Absolutely not." "You're still recovering from a serious wound," Fiona countered. "If it tears open, if infection returns, you'll need me." "It's too dangerous," Flynn insisted. Fiona stood her ground. "I've faced danger before, and I told you, I go where I'm needed." Their gazes locked in silent battle. Finally, Flynn's shoulders slumped in resignation. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "I'll take that as a compliment," Fiona replied, already gathering supplies. They left town under cover of darkness, Flynn riding slowly but steadily, Fiona beside him. The Triple R was a 2-hour ride north, its sprawling ranch house set against the backdrop of rugged mountains. As they approached, Flynn signaled for caution. "Something's wrong," he murmured. "Too quiet." The main house was dark, no lanterns burning in the bunkhouse. As they drew closer, Flynn suddenly reined in sharply. "Get down!" he hissed, sliding painfully from his horse. They crouched behind a low stone wall as Flynn surveyed the ranch yard. "There," he pointed. "Men positioned at the corners of the house and barn. They're waiting." "For you," Fiona whispered. Flynn nodded grimly. "Stay here. I'm going to circle around, try to find my men." Before Fiona could protest, he had slipped away into the darkness. She waited, heart pounding, every minute stretching into what felt like hours. The sound of a twig snapping nearby made her freeze. "Well, well," came a silky voice behind her. "What have we here?" Fiona whirled to find Harrison Wade standing there, a pistol aimed at her chest. Behind him, 2 rough-looking men emerged from the shadows. "Dr. Everett," Wade continued smoothly. "How unexpected. I assume Mr. Archer is nearby?" Fiona lifted her chin defiantly. "I came alone to check on the ranch hands. I heard they might need medical attention." Wade's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A noble lie, Doctor, but unnecessary. I know Flynn is here. In fact, I'm counting on it." He gestured to his men. "Bring her. Our friend Archer won't let any harm come to his lady doctor." They marched her into the ranch yard, Wade keeping his pistol trained on her back. "Flynn Archer," he called out. "I have someone here you might want to keep alive. Show yourself, or the doctor gets a bullet." Silence answered him. Wade's expression darkened. "I won't ask again, Archer. 3 seconds and I shoot." "I'm here," came Flynn's voice as he stepped from the shadows, hands raised. "Let her go, Wade. This is between you and me." "On the contrary," Wade replied. "It's about business, nothing personal. The Triple R sits on the richest land in the territory, water rights, timber, and rumors of silver in the north section. My investors back east are quite eager to acquire it. So you rustle cattle, burn homes, murder innocent people, all for profit?" Flynn's voice was tight with controlled rage. Wade shrugged. "Progress requires sacrifice. The frontier is changing. Men like you lone wolves, outdated gunslingers are a dying breed. The future belongs to men of vision and capital. And men without conscience," Fiona added bitterly. Wade's smile turned cold. "Conscience is a luxury, Doctor. One I've never been able to afford." He turned to Flynn. "Now, you're going to sign over the Triple R to me. I have the papers right here." "I don't own the Triple R," Flynn countered. "I'm just the foreman." "A technicality," Wade dismissed. "Your employer, Mr. Roberts, signed power of attorney to you last year. Quite convenient, really. Sign the papers, or watch the good doctor die. After that, I'll burn this ranch to the ground with you in it." Flynn's gaze met Fiona's, a silent communication passing between them. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Let me see these papers," Flynn said, stepping forward. As Wade reached into his coat, Fiona suddenly dropped to the ground. In the same instant, Flynn drew and fired in one fluid motion. Wade staggered back, shock spreading across his face as a crimson stain blossomed on his chest. Chaos erupted. Gunfire flashed in the darkness as Wade's men and Flynn exchanged shots. Fiona crawled toward the shelter of the porch, but a searing pain in her arm stopped her. She'd been hit. More shots rang out, but now they were coming from the direction of the bunkhouse. Suddenly, the ranch yard was filled with Triple R cowboys who had been hiding, waiting for Flynn's signal. When the shooting finally stopped, Wade lay dead, along with 3 of his men. 2 others were captured, hands bound behind them. "Fiona!" Flynn was suddenly beside her, his face tight with concern as he examined her wounded arm. "How bad?" "Just a graze," she assured him, though the pain was considerable. "You're the one who needs looking after. You've torn your stitches." Indeed, blood was seeping through Flynn's trousers where his wound had reopened. Despite their injuries, they tended to each other and the wounded ranch hands. By dawn, the Triple R was secure again. Wade's surviving men locked in the storage cellar. I sent word to the marshal, one of the cowboys reported. They should be here by tomorrow to take the prisoners. Flynn nodded, his face drawn with exhaustion and pain. He and Fiona had taken refuge in his quarters in the ranch house, where she had restitched his wound and he had bandaged her arm. "I'm sorry," he said quietly as she finished tying off the new stitches. "I never meant for you to be in danger." "I chose to come," Fiona reminded him, "and I'd make the same choice again." Flynn caught her hand as she moved to put away her medical supplies. "Why? Why risk your life for a ranch that isn't yours, for people you barely know?" Fiona met his gaze steadily. "For the same reason I came to Painted Rock in the first place. Because it was the right thing to do. Because I was needed." She hesitated, then added softly, "Because you needed me." Something shifted in Flynn's expression, a vulnerability appearing beneath the hard exterior he showed the world. "I've spent most of my life not needing anyone," he confessed, "not allowing myself to need anyone. It's safer that way." "Safer perhaps," Fiona agreed. "But lonely?" Flynn's hand tightened around hers. "You're unlike any woman I've ever known, Fiona Everett." "Is that good or bad?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. "Good," he said decisively. "Definitely good." The days that followed brought change to Painted Rock. The territorial marshal arrived with deputies, taking Wade's men into custody and beginning an investigation that would eventually implicate several prominent citizens as conspirators in the rustling operation. The rustling stopped, and ranchers began to recover their stolen cattle. Flynn and Fiona returned to town once they were both well enough to travel. Their arrival together, battered but unbowed, cemented the town's growing respect for the female doctor who had proved her worth beyond question. Summer faded into autumn, and Fiona found herself increasingly drawn to the Triple R and its taciturn foreman. Flynn rode into town frequently, ostensibly on ranch business, but inevitably finding his way to her door. Sometimes he brought patients' ranch hands with injuries or ailments. Other times he came with small gifts, fresh berries, a book he thought she might enjoy, a finely crafted leather case for her medical instruments. They spoke of everything and nothing, her dreams for expanding her practice, his plans for the Triple R, the changing seasons, the growing settlement. But beneath their conversations ran an undercurrent of something deeper, something neither had yet found the courage to name. On a crisp October evening, Flynn arrived at her door with an invitation. "There's something I want to show you," he said mysteriously. "Can you ride out with me tomorrow? I'll have you back by nightfall." Curious, Fiona agreed. The next morning dawned clear and cool as Flynn arrived with 2 horses. They rode north, beyond the Triple R's main holdings, into foothills painted with the gold and crimson of autumn. After several hours, they crested a ridge, and Flynn reined in. Below them stretched a secluded valley sheltered by mountains on 3 sides, a clear stream winding through meadows still green despite the advancing season. "It's beautiful," Fiona breathed. "It's mine," Flynn said quietly. "Or it will be, once the papers are filed. I've been saving for years to buy my own place. This is it, 500 acres, good water, sheltered from the worst winter storms." Fiona turned to him in surprise. "You're leaving the Triple R?" Flynn nodded. "Mr. Roberts is selling. He's never set foot on the place, and he's got other investments that need his attention. I could have stayed on with the new owners, but," he shrugged, "this valley has always called to me. I want something of my own." "It's perfect," Fiona said. Understanding what this meant to a man who had spent his life working other men's land, Flynn guided his horse closer to hers. "There's just one problem with my plan," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "What's that?" "This valley's too beautiful for just one person," he said, his eyes holding hers. "It needs a family, children laughing, a garden growing, a home that's more than just shelter." He took a deep breath. "It needs you, Fiona." Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Flynn, I know it's not Boston," he hurried on, "and I know your work is important to you. You could still practice. I'll build you a proper office. The valley's only an hour's ride from town, but at night you could come home to this, to me." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Flynn Archer?" A smile broke across his face, transforming it. "I reckon I am, though I'm making a poor job of it. I'm not a man of fancy words, Fiona, but I know that I love you. I think I've loved you since you stood in that saloon and ordered everyone around while saving a man's life." Fiona laughed through her tears. "And I think I've loved you since you told me I shouldn't have come, and I told you I go where I'm needed." "And do you?" Flynn asked softly. "Need me?" In answer, Fiona leaned across the space between their horses and kissed him, a gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more profound, a promise, a beginning. When they finally drew apart, Flynn's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'll take that as a yes, Dr. Everett." "It's a yes," she confirmed, "though I'll keep my name professionally." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Flynn assured her. "I fell in love with Dr. Fiona Everett after all." They were married in the small church in Painted Rock 2 weeks later, the entire town turning out to celebrate. The Triple R Cowboys created an honor guard with raised rifles, and Mayor Wilson proudly gave the bride away. By spring, their home in the valley was complete, a sturdy ranch house with a special wing designed as Fiona's medical office. True to his word, Flynn supported her continued practice, often accompanying her on distant house calls and helping to transport seriously ill patients to her care. As the years passed, the valley blossomed, as did their family. Their first child, a daughter with her father's green eyes and her mother's determination, arrived just before their first anniversary. A son followed 2 years later, and eventually another daughter, completing their family. Fiona never stopped practicing medicine. As Painted Rock grew into a proper town, she trained nurses, established a small hospital, and earned a reputation that extended throughout the territory. Flynn's ranch prospered, his careful stewardship of the land creating one of the most successful operations in the region. Sometimes, on summer evenings, they would sit on their porch watching their children play in the yard, and Flynn would take Fiona's hand, still bearing the slight calluses from her medical instruments. "Do you ever regret it?" he would ask, "choosing this life over what you might have had back east?" And Fiona would always smile, looking out over the valley that had become her home, at the family they had created together. "Never," she would reply. "I told you from the beginning I always go where I'm needed, and I've never been needed anywhere as much as here, with you." Years later, when their hair had silvered and their grandchildren played in the same yard where their children had once romped, visitors to the valley would often comment on the unusual couple who had tamed this wilderness, the famous lady doctor and the stoic rancher whose love story had become legend in those parts. "Wasn't it hard?" young women would sometimes ask Fiona. "Being a female physician on the frontier, balancing your work with family?" And Fiona would glance at Flynn, who still watched her with the same admiration and love after decades together. "The things most worth doing are rarely easy," she would reply. "But when you find where you're truly needed and who truly needs you, that's where you belong. That's where you'll find your happiness." In the twilight of their lives, Flynn and Fiona Archer remained, as they had always been, partners in all things, their love a testament to the unlikely beginnings of a cowboy who had warned a determined young doctor away, and the woman who had refused to go anywhere but where her heart and her calling led her.